probably at least 2 more channels forgotten about. So with that, I'll turn it over to Garrin.
Cool, thanks. We've done this before. It's kind of fun.
In this room.
In this very room, and this very so most of you know me, but my name is Garrin Ball. I'm a senior solutions architect at DuPont. So I thank you for Brendan for inviting me to speak on this. This is a topic like most of us are very passionate about. At one point I kind of wanted to do a technical demo, but I knew that if I did, the demo gods would not be kind to me. So I'm like, let me just turn this around, something I could just pull off the cuff if I had to in a pinch. But I did put together some slides about selling DevOps. Not so much selling DevOps like door to door like you're selling vacuum cleaners, but it's a concept and philosophy that not everybody's on board with. You think they would be, and maybe they are to some degree, but how do you approach different people for different kind of scenarios?
Speaking of those,
Do you have to do it?
What'd you do?
Yeah, there it is.
Okay.
Waking up. About me, like I said, I'm a senior solutions architect. I'm also a software developer. I have been for a long time, probably longer than a few of you, but it's always good. I'm a self-proclaimed DevOps evangelist. That's kind of why I'm here. I love to talk about it. I wave my arms around, as Dave will testify to. I'm very animated. I'm also a heavy metal headbanger, in case you guys all are into that kind of thing. That's kind of my style.
And what's the belt buckle with it?
Oh, I want to be able to tie my shoes kind of belt buckle. So.
Oh, you let us down.
All right. So, general principles of DevOps. Calmer, you may or may not have heard of it. Calmer is kind of a term coined from the SAFe, the scaled agile practice. And whether you're a fan of SAFe or not, I think Calmer generally represents the same kind of pillars I think most of us can agree on, whether you like the term or or not, but I use it as kind of a basis. For Calmer, C stands for culture, right? That's the culture side of DevOps. It's more of the philosophy. It's about thinking in terms of automation, thinking in terms of self-service, and also awarding or rewarding people for taking risk, as opposed to punishing them for doing something wrong. And it's one of the bigger shifts in DevOps is just how do you shift an entire organization to have more of that culture focus. A is for automation. One probably, from a technical perspective, it's one that we focus on a lot, and sometimes too much and too soon in some cases, but this is the automation side of things. How do we get things without people involved? How do we let the machines do the repetitive work? Lean, obviously this kind of comes from agile, right? How do you just remove the waste out of your value stream? How do you take what you're trying to do, eliminate either humans, eliminate wait time, just the general agile practice of lean is a big part of DevOps. Measurement, one of my favorites because it's often overlooked a little bit. It's the telemetry you get out of your applications, as well as your processes and your practices to know, am I doing better? Because it's hard to iterate on something when you don't know if you're moving the needle at all. So you have to establish the needle in order to then iterate on it to try to move it. And last, recovery. One of my favorite topics, I think, is the recovery aspect that DevOps tends to approach, because I look at it a lot like waterfall. Has anybody worked in waterfall software development, right, back in the day? One of the things with waterfall I think was very interesting was the fact that you would say, and I worked off these, man, I'm having flashbacks. Here's a big old approach or a requirements document, right? Everything you need to code is in this. And you spent months and months of development and you missed something, right? Oh, we didn't think about that use case, or oh, that's what the business didn't, we didn't realize the business wanted that type of stuff, right? And then you go back and you go, I must have done my requirements wrong. What I need is more analysis. What I need is more work up front, and that would allow me to do it. And years and years and years go by, and we realize it's like chasing a unicorn, right? It just doesn't happen. And I think recovery is a lot like that, where when it comes to outages and when it comes to problems in your environment, there's still the method of prevention is my number one focus. Yeah, kinda, but I guarantee you, how long have you been in these environments trying to prevent stuff? Have you ever stopped having SEVs? Have you ever stopped having an incident of some kind because you finally covered all your prevention means? No, again, it's kind of the unicorn. So now it looks more towards recovery, right? Realizing that crap is gonna happen and it's more important that you recover from it well. More important that you do that than to focus so heavily on the prevention, because it's a little bit like a pipe dream. So, given that general framework of kind of DevOps principles, I'm going to talk to you briefly about 3 characters that you may encounter in your existing environments. I call them the believer, the faker, and the headache maker. The believer is going to be somebody who's probably like one of us, like, yeah, man, DevOps rocks. You know, they got the T-shirt, the whole bit. It's a really cool thing. The faker is a little trickier. The faker isn't going to acknowledge that they don't like it, right, or that they have reservations, because it's hard for them to go, Agile sucks. Who says that? Nobody really says that, right? Even if they believe it, right, they're not going to openly admit it. So the faker is a little bit more about agreeing with you, but at the same time not really moving the mark. And then the headache maker, we all know this person. This is really where you're not getting any movement from them. They're stuck in their ways, or they're intentionally trying to counteract your movements in DevOps. So my goal here was to take that calmer principle, those 5 pieces here, and kind of give you a quick overview of how I would treat some of the common challenges of each of those principles with these 3 personalities. Fair? We'll see if I did any good. All right, talk a little bit about culture. So the believer, I love the believer here, because culture is one of those things where it's easy to go, culture's awesome, yeah, we gotta have some good culture. You know, and you're like, yeah, but that's easier said than done. You're talking about moving mountains here when it comes from an organizational outlook. And the organization probably has pre-existing organizational silos, where very few organizations can go, well, we've been org like this forever. I'm just going to wipe the board and reorg us into more of a, anti-siloed kind of pattern. They're probably not going to be able to do that on day one. The sell here, I think, is introducing the transformational team and or the concept of the dojo, right? Where you realize that you can't move the mountain overnight. You're glad you got an ally on your side, but the transformational team looks to be the source of coaching, looks to be the source of that transformation. It's a lot like my team over at Delta Dental, right? The original goal is to kind of say, hey, we're a transformational team. We're here to teach and to coach and to guide more than anything else. The dojo here works for well. If you've heard the concept of the dojo or that terminology, probably, but some companies basically literally build out a room they kind of call the dojo, and they invite teams into it, right, for a particular sprint or a particular release cycle. Say, hey, for this release cycle, we're going to invite you into the dojo. We're going to work by you side by side as you code, as you test, as you do everything, and hopefully at the end of your release cycle, one team will be better off for it and be able to move forward. So for me, when you got somebody who's already on board, that's probably one of your key sells here, is to give them something to begin the transformation, because it's not going to happen just because they believe in it. The faker, the challenge here is fear prevents real change. I think this is where they believe in the idea that the culture should be different, that we should think more about self-service, we should think more about these types of things, but they don't really have the ability to do it, right? They're driven by fear of failure, by some kind of organizational change, something that they're not in control over. So self-service here, I think, is a big win for this, because everybody wants to be better at what they currently do, right? I mean, the workload that, if you say the faker is some kind of member of management, they're going to have work ahead of them that needs to get done quicker. And introducing self-service, which is a DevOps culture concept, is a simple way of starting to break down that barrier, because you can take something that's now kind of problematic and say, hey, let's make that self-serve, right? Let's not involve your team. Let's have that done, through some kind of automation tool, something to that effect. The headache maker. The challenge here, the headache maker is focused on what I would refer to as empire building and also accountability for the sake of punishment. They've got their border, right? And for rightfully so, they've built their organization over time and over a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and they've established it as a kingdom. So to say that break down the walls of your kingdom, the new way is all inclusive, is a very, very difficult shift for them. So I look to seek to improve the culture within the silo, because I think it's common for a DevOps, a practitioner, to go, hey man, DevOps, we're all together, Dev and Ops, and it's all big, it's all big, happy, and they're like, what the hell are you talking about? Right? But if you look to their individual silo, if you look to whether it be an application development organization or an infrastructure organization or or a testing organization, there's a lot of DevOps culture principles that still apply within that silo. So maybe try not to kind of preach the big picture to this individual. Say, how would I take your existing testing organization, and rather than preaching to you about how that should be built into your development process, let's improve your testing. Let's improve the culture you have of your testing, and we'll worry about the silos later. Because hopefully by then you'll be able to kind of guide them down that road. This picture's kind of creepy, dude. I was like, kind of stares at you after a while. So automation, one we love. The believer, biting off more than they can chew, and the tools will make me DevOps. I get this a lot from this kind of person. If you go to a conference, DevOps, man, I say, DevOps organizations smell blood in the water when you start talking about tooling, right? Whether it's Jenkins, it's Kubernetes, it's OpenStack. There's a million ways of making money on that concept. And the believer wants it all, right? Because they think that, hey, all these cool tools available, maybe I got budget for it. This is going to kind of guide my hand to DevOps. But in reality, that's going to cause them more. It's going to cause them more pain over the long term. So the cell, I look at it as a simplified tool chain, right? You can do a lot, as many of us have. You can do a lot with a little. It doesn't require monolithic major tools. There's a lot of simpler, even open source tools that can better capture the spirit of automation than trying to buy mega tools and thinking they're going to solve the world for you. Also emphasizing to never automate a bad practice. This is when I use this phrase a lot. It's pretty commonplace. But when you talk about automation, the first thing people do is, well, I do this, and now let's automate that. I'm going to write some scripts, and it's going to do all the same thing. And you go, wait a minute. Are you sure that the value stream, what you're doing today manually, is actually good? Because if you go to that kind of lean principle, first eliminate the waste, and then automate it, right? And I think you'll get that with the backing of somebody like the believer, because they're anxious to automate, but at the same time, don't just automate for the sake of automation. And automation for self-service first. I'm a big fan of self-service as part of the DevOps culture. I do it a lot also just because my own team, it's how we stay ahead of the curve with all the work that we have to do. So again, self-service for automation, before you look at automating a lot of just behind the scenes stuff that nobody ever really sees, by showing self-service where now I can eliminate manual processes, I'll file a ticket for that kind of stuff. I can put self-service portals in front of people. It's very visual. It's very like, holy crap, this is awesome. Right? I mean, I use example. My team put together it cost me a day in costume, but that's a different story. They put together a self-service portal that took an 8-hour process for us down to 3 minutes. Now, that's freaking awesome. I mean, we eliminated ourselves from project dependencies because we no longer had to do anything. We completely gave the teams the tools that they needed, and that's a great concept for this type of personality. The faker. So I made up a word for this slide, just for this slide, but I feel it really holds true. I call it photomation, right? The challenge with photomation is the idea like, hey, yeah, we've automated that, right? Did you really, right? Because a lot of times you'll find that the faker, they're on board with automation. They'll say they've automated things. When you go down to it, it involves somebody press that button and watch the screen spin by just in case it doesn't work. So when I encounter those, it's like, your idea of automation is different than mine, right? Automation is the reason I'm delegating this task to a computer is because it can do it repetitively, consistently, and such. If I have to press buttons and watch stuff, we're not quite there yet. Maybe a good start, but it's a challenge because an organization could go, yes, our development pipeline is highly automated. It only takes 5 people to do a build. I'm suspicious of that statement, right? Because of the concept of photomation. It's almost hard to say. The other challenge I think with the faker is job security. Yeah, this sounds great, but I got people who press buttons for a living and they're freaking out. Common, right? I mean, that's a consistent challenge for any of these organizations. So my recommendation on the cell, one, for photomation, value stream mapping to highlight the gaps in the automation. So value stream mapping, if you've not gone through that process, is a good process. It's a painstaking process, but literally if you have to get out the freaking Post-it notes and a marker and say, what is the first thing you do? What is the second thing you do? And finally, this is an automated process, identify which Post-it notes are handled by computers and which Post-it notes are handled by people in this automated process. Go through that painstaking process to show the individual that they're not as automated as you think they are. Ensure automation for job improvement, less weekend work. I think this is a help for the job security stuff because nobody really likes to work weekends, right? But a lot of the button pushing kind of stuff requires weekend work. Whether you still be in a release that has to happen on the weekend, you can still only do infrastructure changes. But I think if you approach automation for people who are insecure about it as a means to say, hey, right now we're still going to give you the button to press, right? But all that work can be done. So maybe you just schedule the button to happen over the weekend and you don't have to be on site. You don't have to be on the call this time. Kind of begin to shift them slowly where they still feel empowered, they still feel a control offered, but why have them work weekends? Because nobody wants to work weekends. Yes, the headache maker. So you hear eyes on glass is an expression I hear a lot. And I get it, you want people there, you want them engaged, right? Because you think that's where the security comes from. But for automation, they have to get the trust factor that I guarantee you, if it's a repetitive task, I can get a computer to do it better repetitively than I can people just because they're looking at the screen, right? And if we've not made that case to people, we're probably not showing them good examples of automation. Right, we're probably back to that photomation thing where it kind of works, but I still gotta have eyes on glass in case it doesn't, right? And that's kind of a dangerous cycle. They'll also argue that automation is too complicated. Well, in my organization, this is hella complicated stuff. We can't automate that. Bull, right? It's kind of because I guarantee you, when it's a repetitive task, machines are awesome at repetition. It's one of the things they were built for. I guarantee you, it's not too complicated for us to be able to automate, especially if we go back to the concepts to say, hey, only automate a good practice, right? Strip out the weird stuff and allow it to be more streamlined. So the sell in this is I like to set objectives. So I say set objectives that only automation will achieve, right? Because even management, so if you imagine the headache maker as some kind of director or somebody who's resistant to this type of stuff, they're going to like KPIs, they're going to like objectives for their teams. So I use an example recently where say some testing you're going to do is going to take 3 days or 4 days to get through all the testing of all this application stuff. I say, okay, well, set the objective that has to be done in 12 hours overnight, right? So I can stop coding at 6 p.m. on a Tuesday. When I come in, At 8 a.m. the next morning, I've been completely tested, I've got a green or red light. So as an objective, you can't take 4 days of testing and knock it down to 12 hours without automation, right? But I think you'll get agreement from an individual like this that the objective sounds good, right? Because you can show all the business value from accomplishing those objectives. So rather than banging on, hey, automation is the future, automation is awesome, and go, here's an idea. How about this objective? Would you like to have this in your organization? Hell yeah, that sounds awesome, great. Now go ask your team how many people they're gonna need to do that. Oh, okay, that's gonna, there's gonna be too many people. Okay, well, automation can help. Automation can help you reach that objective. And that's one of the avenues, I think, with the headache maker to pursue. All right, lean. I like lean, especially the believer. We're totally agile, right? I don't know, are you? Just because you do all your meetings standing up doesn't mean you're agile, right? It doesn't really mean that. You think you are. So when you're trying to sell lean concepts, the lean concept of DevOps to somebody who thinks they're already doing it, I think the iteration, reviewing the basics, and value stream mapping. I often tell my team a lot. I was like, listen, if I can't iterate on a bad process, then I'm a hypocrite, right? I can't just have the golden everything go, yeah, Agile did that. I should be able to take something that's completely messed up and iterate on it, right? Now, with someone who thinks they're already doing that, they're probably going to need a little bit more help. They're going to have to go down to the basics, right? The basics of Agile. Are you writing good user stories? Have you done a value stream mapping exercise to see if you have waste? Somebody who says they're doing lean Agile, and you go, well, show me the value stream of your release process. Show me the value stream of, what the heck are you talking about? Well, how do you know it's lean? How do you know you don't have a 6-hour wait somewhere while somebody tries to find their email password to log in and see whether they got an email of some kind, right? You have to be able to do that kind of stuff to say that you're doing lean Agile. So going back to those basics and the value stream is a very critical component to getting somebody who thinks they're on board, getting them getting them the next step of the way. So the faker, in my mind, goes through the motions when it comes to being lean, right? They go to the stand-ups, they do the retrospectives, they check the box, right? Hey, we're Agile, we scrummed the crap out of that yesterday. Okay, I like what you're trying to do. But I say Agile DevOps isn't magic. Don't pretend that it is. Don't pretend that just by declaring you're Agile, declaring your Scrum, that somehow you've just found some new realm of enlightenment, right? It doesn't happen that way. You have to go through the painstaking detail to go, why are you having a stand-up, right? Why are you doing retrospectives? Are you getting the value out of them that you think you are? Not just because it's in the book, it's because in the manual, you saw a motivational poster that says Agile wins or something like that. But do you really understand those concepts? So learning to show real value from existing Agile processes will help you convert the faker into really a proponent, right? I see a lot. I see, well, do you have thinking about story cards, do you have a card in for that? Is there a card? Do you know what the purpose of the card is for? Is it really the fact that it's a card? Does it represent a user story? You can't just say things like that and pretend that it's Agile, right? It just doesn't work that way. You have to kind of stop these people and go, I think I know what you're doing, but walk me through this slowly. You want a card because you have work for me. Is it a well-defined user story? Does it show value in it? Do I have acceptance criteria? No, I just give you a card. Hey, a card's not a ticket, right? It's not a ticket from a ticketing system, right? And I see a lot of those from kind of the faker personality where you think you know shot them, but they don't, right? And this is our opportunity to kind of guide them, not by strong-arming the process, but by taking them back to basics, right? Walk me through this very slowly. All right, the headache maker. So the challenge, classic methodologies and Excel spreadsheets. Dave knows I rip on Excel spreadsheets all the time, right? I like Excel. It's great for finance work. no problem. But if I have to use Excel to get software off the door, in my opinion, I'm doing something wrong, right? If Microsoft had an Excel outage and I couldn't deliver software because I didn't know what my steps were, I probably failed to some degree. Now, doesn't mean that planning is bad, doesn't mean that we're trying to go chaotic and just throw things out the window here. But the challenge with the headache makers are going to be very, very set on the idea of the planning of the Excel, or the order, the cadence of Excel is what gives them the power and the confidence to release software or to do something that they think they need, whatever. So to combat that, the cell, I say no fanboys allowed. I say this because, and I'll be honest, I'm sometimes guilty of this myself. It's easy to preach DevOps, right, when it comes to people who are non-DevOps, right? It's easy for me to criticize somebody with a Gantt chart or something like that, you know, hey, I'm being very agile. But the reality is we have to be able to take the concerns that the headache maker has, the reason for the Excel spreadsheet, the reason that they're still hung up on maybe a waterfall approach, and show them in painstaking detail necessary how you do this with Agile, right? Infrastructure is a fantastic example because classically, infrastructure is probably managed via waterfall, right? Just common, you have machines and you're doing things and you have project plans and then the whole bit. You can't just go, oh, by the way, you're supposed to be doing that Agile now because infrastructure does code and something. It doesn't fly that fast, right? You have to be able to say, hey, the reason I don't need this project plan is because you can see here, I've already broken these features down. I've already planned this out in a different way. But if you can't demonstrate that, if you can't kind of practice what you preach from that perspective, find somebody who can. Because it's too critical of a conversation to kind of rely on, you know, your belief that DevOps is the way to go if you can't demonstrate to them explicitly how our processes work better than their existing ones. That's why I say walk the walk, right? It's hard sometimes, and sometimes there's situations where, heck, I'm not even qualified, you know, because I don't have experience in some case. But find people that do have that experience to move you through that process. All right, so measurement, kind of go this quickly. Data is great, but is it the right data? Measurement for the believer, hey, they love data, they love all these good things, but they may not be getting the right stuff. So the cell, ask them questions like, well, what do you want to know so you can take some action against it? Right? I would love to know this so that I could do that. If it's not that kind of conversation, if that's not what's driving their data, they may need to make a shift. Also talk to the believers about measuring the absence of an event. This one I think is kind of interesting because so often we're measuring things that happen, right? An error occurred or a transaction occurred or something happened. But you ever get caught in a situation where something didn't happen and that's what bit you? You know, I've been there. You're like, everything's working fine. Yeah, the system hasn't sent an email in 3 days. Whoa, crap. You know, I didn't see any errors for that, but it didn't happen. So the anomaly is something didn't happen, right? That's a measurement that some people aren't quite familiar with doing, but somebody like the believer would probably be on board with, hey, that sounds like an awesome thing. All right, the faker. So I love the faker here for this one. This is one of my favorites. So manipulated data and untrusted data that is not actionable are kind of signs of the faker here. You see this with like performance data as an example. I've seen this one a number of times with performance data. So you may be reviewing a load test and they go, hey, you know, this service went from 0.2 seconds, making numbers up, to 9 seconds, right? And you go, oh, shoot, that's probably really bad, isn't it? Well, we don't know for sure. It could be an anomaly. Oh, well, so should I approve or not approve this build to go live based on that data? We should probably just let it go live because it usually works fine. Okay, so you grasped the idea of the measurement part of the idea of the DevOps, but you stumbled a little bit that it needs to be actionable. I should be able to say, based on this data, this build is not approved. Because when it comes time for automation, like really awesome kind of automation where the computer goes, did I pass my performance test? right? The computer is analyzing that. The computer's not going to go, well, it usually works, so let it go. It's going to put a hard stop on that type of stuff, and you have to begin to coach them on that kind of data. So the sell for the faker, look for more visibility options, dashboard visibility, right? It shouldn't be some printout that gets handed around and closed behind closed doors, right? Look for dashboards, look for boards. If nothing else, I should be able to go to some kind of repository or a Confluence site or a wiki of some kind that says, hey, what were the last performance metrics against my build? I want to take a look at it. I want to make sure that you're getting data that I feel is accurate for my application so that it becomes actionable. And if the data doesn't inspire action or confidence, throw it out. Right? Don't pretend that it's useful data. Don't pretend that bar charts and stuff that show all sorts of stuff that look cool that's not actionable. It's probably not going to help you out. You're on the right road. You're on the road of measurement and stuff, but you're going off the rails a little bit because you're not doing anything about it. And with a headache maker, something to hide, or the truth hurts. Right? They don't want to see the data, right? Necessarily, or they don't want it to be published live because they know there's problems with it. So I say seek out consumers for the metrics, right? Who else would be interested in knowing what's going on, right? If it's a testing metric, if it's a velocity metric, no matter what your metric is, there's probably some kind of consumer of it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a valuable metric anyways. So other than the headache maker, find out people who would like this data so that it becomes actionable for them, and then make it visible, right? It's a little bit of a end around a little bit, but I guarantee you're going to have, kind of an advocate in the consumer, right? They want it, so once they find out that maybe you can help produce that data, then it becomes their battle with the individual. Well, I don't want you to see the data, but I need the data. Or they can have that conversation, and we as kind of DevOps kind of just facilitate that automation, facilitate that discussion. All right, recovery. Last one here. So with a believer, I say the challenge is prevention is often still in the spotlight, right? They love the idea of recovery, who doesn't? But the idea of, hey, how do we prevent that from happening again in the future, right? Has anybody gone through the 5 whys? Right, yeah, 5 whys. I'm not a fan. In some cases, yes, but only because it usually tries to find that one thing, right? That one dude that did that one thing that one time, and you can duct tape that guy down and that won't happen again, right? And you're like, no, that's not how this flies. So the value streaming of the system recovery, right? Going back to the value stream to say, listen, fine, do your prevention, but I want to see what recovery looks like for this application, right? When it fails, and it will, how do you recover? What is your process today? And let's go through, again, painstaking detail. Let's value stream it out. Who gets called? Right? Because you'd be surprised at the organizational impact. Who gets called? Is it a DevOps team gets called? Or is it the developer who wrote the application that crashed in the first place? Right? That decision alone is hugely impactful to the organization, and it starts a lot of conversation about how recovery should work. And set objectives that drive the team towards the solutions. Again, I'm a big fan of objectives. If you say, listen, I understand crap happens, but if the website goes down, you've got 60 seconds to have it back up. Whoa, are you out of your mind? Well, no, it's an objective. What would it take for a 60-second recovery time? Is that a back out? Is that high availability? Or what would it take to do that? And asking those kind of questions. And you'd be surprised at how many people don't seem to set those kind of objectives. I pull numbers out of the air all the time. What would it be? 60 seconds. Oh, where'd you get that from? Can you do 60 seconds? No, why not? I don't know. We'll find out, and then we'll change the number. You got to start somewhere, right? Make them figure out why they can't have that. We don't have enough hardware, don't have enough people. Okay, is it a money thing? If I got you lots of money, could I have 60 seconds? Well, then yes, you could. Okay, now it's a money issue, and I can have my 60 seconds. But if it's a process issue, if it's my people can't type that fast, okay. Now we're getting down to some of the other problems. So the faker, the challenge is heroes and manual intervention, right? This is like the appearance of good recovery. This is, oh crap, it broke. Dude, it's down. Hang on. You're back up. Wow, that was fast. Yeah, but only because the so-and-so answered their phone on the first ring. Only because their Wi-Fi happened to be up while they're at home and they happen to have their laptop, and all these scenarios that kind of drive to the hero being able to respond. So the faker, yeah, we had a really fast recovery, man. My people are awesome. Yes, I'm sure they're awesome, but that's not good enough. So look at the automation of the recovery procedures again. Okay, how does so-and-so do this, right? What makes them so good at bringing the systems back up? Can I automate that? Is it because they're bouncing the servers? Is that what it is? Because if that's all it is, the computer can usually tell when it needs to be bounced, or hey, it crashed, reboot. I mean, there's things you can do to kind of facilitate that to avoid the hero altogether. Our friend the headache maker game. So, but ITIL says this checkbox is my salvation. I made up that line myself, right? I think this goes again towards the idea that prevention is going to be the ultimate salvation, right? And I hear it a lot. It's like, well, should we have gone through a checklist before we did this release? Should somebody have reviewed this list of things before that button got pressed? No, not really. You know, I mean, that may be a stopgap in the short term, but you can't automate a bunch of checklists necessarily, unless the computer can actually check on certain things. But that's not the way. The way to be able to recover faster is not just that prevention. And you see a focus on process and paperwork with this mindset. And I've witnessed it. Some of you guys here are kind of in the same environment as me. I've witnessed it. Massive problem, and arguing over who has to file the paperwork. What? Get the system up. You know, bring it back up, and then worry about the paperwork. Right, and I've seen that where even in previous roles I've had where it's like, well, based on this particular problem, we have to file this paperwork. Listen, these processes are never supposed to get in the way of servicing the customer. Get the system back up before you work about paperwork. But this kind of personality will focus heavily on the paperwork because the actual recovery process is too challenging, or it's too scary for them. So they'll focus on that. So sell here, as I say, arguing against prevention is useless, meaning that if they want to go, you know, I need to prevent this from happening in the future. You're not going to win an argument that says, well, no, you shouldn't. Obviously, you do want to prevent it from happening in the future if you can. That's way better. I'm not going to argue with you on that. But I'm going to argue the fact that there's probably other things that are going to happen that you won't have prevented, right? So I'll agree with you that yes, if we can prevent it, awesome, we should do so. So you can't argue that better recovery is also a problem. If I can't argue against prevention, you can't go, well, you know, I don't care how fast you bring the system back up as long as I prevent it. No, they're going to want that too, right? You know, so you're on the same playing field. But I think the key here is I said prevention of the unknown is hard, but you can practice recovery, right? So that's one of those key things where it's like, sure, prevent it if you can, but there's always something new. There's always some change, some server upgrade, some firmware, something that's going to break you, and you can't practice that kind of prevention. But how you recovery, right? Chaos testing, that kind of stuff, you can practice that all day long. So get really, really good at it. So that way, hey, I get the system back up in 60 seconds no matter what happens, then I'll worry about how well my prevention methodologies are. So I kind of sped through that because for my first time here, I don't want to bore anybody. I kind of wave my hand so much. But for questions and discussions, is there comments on that? Have you seen these kind of personalities in play before? I'm kind of curious. Would you agree or disagree with some of the approaches? Is it hot in here, or is it just me?
It's hot in here.
Okay. So I'm not that nervous.
I've definitely seen a lot of situations where you end up with, I don't know, I'd say the most difficult detractors that I've seen are the people who, they feel that they're a special snowflake, and it's, well, yeah, this pattern, this process, this practice, it works for, you know, all the rest of the world, but I'm different, I'm special, I need to be different in this way. And it's funny though, because I find a lot of times those same people who want to say, well, I'm different, I'm unique, they also want to point out a very specific way of doing a very specific thing and say, and so that wouldn't work. It's like, I don't think you recognize that this is a malleable, transformational thing.
Right.
It's evolution, not necessarily revolution. And the thing that I like to point out to people is, find any sort of agile documentation, white paper, anywhere that doesn't reference continuous improvement.
Sure.
Which is to say, the thing that they just told you can be better.
Right.
And will change if you stare at it long enough and want to make it better.
I love using like the state, you guys read the State of DevOps report from Dora, right? I love Dr. Forsgren's approach to some of this stuff because it's like math and statistics have shown that situation you're talking about is bull, right? That there's no statistical difference in companies able to implement DevOps practices and such based on industry, right? The math demonstrates that. That whether it be insurance or automotive or whatever, that there's companies in all industries doing these practices, and I kind of refer them to the doc. Or sometimes if I'm feeling a little kind of snarky, it would be more of like, oh, you write Java applications. Yeah, other people do that too. Like, really? You think you're that unique? You're writing apps in Java. You're writing software in Java, gets deployed to what? JBoss or something like that. I guarantee you, there's a couple tutorials up there. That stuff isn't, the complexity may be in your business logic, right? Your business rules could be highly complicated, sure. But for me to take a software artifact, put it on a server, that part doesn't change as much, right? It's the other stuff. Not the complexity of your business rules is not in play here. But you're right, I get that kind of
Yeah.
which I know it's just strange. I'm surprised that people still kind of play that card.
Yeah, they'll either point to, well, Netflix and Google and Amazon, they're just so big, and well, and those startups, well, they're so small.
Right.
And me, I'm in the middle, and I'm different.
And it's kind of funny because don't you think that, it's the company that sees that says this company is really, really big, so they can do awesome stuff. Or this company is really, really small, so they can do awesome stuff. DevOps is kind of for you guys in the middle, right? It's to keep you applicable, right, in the world that's changing, right? You got startups who can now use these examples. I can, I can spin up a 196 core VM on my Google account in about 15 minutes. It costs me like $1,500 a minute or something crazy like that. But I have access to that hardware in a blink for any purposes that I could possibly want. You didn't used to have access to that. You'd need a data center. You'd need build machines to do that kind of stuff, right? So now the little companies are biting at the heels of the bigger companies. So when the mid-sized company goes, yeah, but we can't do that because we're not agile enough, or these guys have all the money. Well, you better figure something out, because you're not going to be in a very good spot then, because either the big company is going to crush you or the little company is going to eat you. That's why DevOps is here, for you to compete in an arena that you otherwise would not have been able to. Darn people.
What people? Okay. So before the DevOps term was invented, I think some of the things on your slide were already thought of and implemented to an extent. Like I remember writing something. Someone on my team wrote something to give the RJE people, the people who you can call in the middle of the night, the power to restart a service on any server, right? So it put power that was in my hands as a system admin into this guy's hands, and they really appreciated it, and I really appreciated it. And recently we gave Dave Knight the power to do the blue-green flip. That's another example.
For recovery, we got to do the reverse and get that put into place rather quickly, just in case.
It's an off-green button.
Yeah,
But-
that'll give you your 60-second response.
But yeah, everybody wants to be powerful, right? And you give them that power by putting that button in their hands, right?
Power, but ownership too. Because when you give me that button, I have a sense of ownership over well, am I sure that we've done all the right things? And that's where I need to depend on the automation having done all the right checks so that it's almost mindless that a button push could happen without a person. But I still have that anxiety where I feel like I need to go look at some test case results and review some things before I actually push that button.
Because it's
But
your
ultimately, it's a sense of ownership too. It can't just be, okay, thanks, Russ, hit the button.
they put the power in the person who should be responsible for it. Right? It's your role to be.
And the button thing is kind of fun too because, I feel like the button is the first step, right? Heck, my team's written many buttons, and it's just like you said, Dave. It's the button idea is just to get people who still require something to do from a human's perspective, right? Wrap up as many of the manual tasks as possible, and then give them a button, right? But like in your example, you kind of created a button, and then you gave it to somebody who can press it. That doesn't necessarily have the context as to when to press it.
That's right.
Right? They're told to press it. And
What are all the things that happen when you press it?
Yeah, so they press
the
it.
consequences?
It's still a really good first step, but the second step is to then look at your buttons and go, okay, which buttons basically press each other? Right? In the sense that when this happens, we talk about this release all the time. Well, when the servers come back up, I press this button to begin some validation. So you're telling me the computers don't know when they come back up? That it requires somebody to read the log that says, hey, I'm started? I think the computer knows when it's come back up. Why isn't it saying, hey, start my test, or that kind of stuff? Now, day one, that's, maybe that's too scary. That's eliminating jobs. Everybody's kind of freaking out like how we talked about. But if I at least get the buttons, then it's an easier conversation to go, well, hey, I got a button. Dave got, what conditions do you press that button, Dave? Well, I look at the performance results. I look at, okay. So if I had a computer that knew that, could it make the decision for you? Well, yeah, I guess it could.
But we still need you, Dave.
Thanks, Russ. But no, my job is to work myself out of a job. If the automation can replace me, then I can go on to other fun things. That's what we need to look at. And part of the scare with people is, well, we're going to lose jobs. And you talked about that. People need to understand, this is to take away the mundane stuff that computers can do, so you can go focus on something more interesting and more creative.
One of my
More value add.
One of my mentors, I call him, he probably doesn't know it, but so Victor Farsick, you don't know who Victor Farsick is, right? So he's a fun dude. Works for CloudBees, very vocal. I mean, you couldn't put him in front of one of your executives without somebody throwing something, right? So they gave me some really good advice sometimes. He goes, the last human step before releasing code should be the developer, generic term, developer, committing code to the repository. The very last human involvement should be that commit. Because checking in code is the last creative thing that people contribute to the process. Everything else is repetition, and machines are best at repetition. And I was like, yeah, right, I mean, exactly. That's scary.
All the way to prod, huh?
Yeah. All the way to prod.
I know a guy who works at Magic Leap, and they do their whole employee onboarding through committing code. Like they hire a new employee, they update a file, and then off a job runs others' jobs, and then creates their AD account, creates all the other things like that. So
I've seen training material generated from Jenkins, right, where you check in Markdown files, it runs it through Grammarly and all sorts of kind of stuff, cranks out a PowerPoint presentation at the end of the build. Usually we're like pulling up in PowerPoint on our, you're generating documentation through CI/CD. So it's cool when you see automation applied even in things that you think would just be mundane.
And they're a very engineering-heavy organization, so I don't recommend it for everybody. But since they have a fair amount of engineers, it's not uncommon to commit to the repo. These things. But it was pretty cool because they have that change tracking now through the commits, so you can see like what access someone was granted or requested at least. And how it went through the different processes they have. It's pretty cool.
That's very cool.
But I like that you're getting the button at least, because I think to me it's a lot more about shifting left. I read that book Accelerate, which I don't know if you mentioned earlier on these things, but it's a great one. But I like the idea of not being like I've done it too many times in my career of QA and stuff, saying, okay, I'm done with the code, you're QA, it's your responsibility now. And same thing, you can have it with an operations group of just saying, your problem now. And so I like the idea of it becoming all one organization that's kind of responsible, and that hopefully developers are thinking more and more about the actual running of the application, not just getting the code, working on my machine.
One thing you guys probably know better than I do. One thing I'm kind of intrigued by is the fact, like, so on day one, obviously you had a lot of infrastructure, and then you had code, right? Kind of classic silos, that kind of stuff, right? Then you got technologies like Docker and such kind of come out, and you start seeing, dev organizations doing operations, responsible for your own stuff, right? Because you build it, you run it, right? It's that kind of mentality. But now I'm also seeing more and more of a shift, from my perspective, it's a shift, right? When you look at like public cloud providers, I talk like serverless type of architectures, where you're even extracting even further, right? Where it's like, hey, here's my code, just run it, right? Where the developers have zero knowledge of nodes or their platform or anything, So so do you think, is that like a, did we kind of go like very, very siloed, or very, very siloed to devs do everything, to are we going back towards devs focus more on code, and there's this, the cloud is becoming more obscure? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, I would actually say that one of the things that I've seen from serverless, personal experience in working with other people, is when you have that, you're billed by the second of process time for your code. Boy, does the efficiency of how you write your code have an impact on dollars.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see that when you've got pre-provisioned VMs, where it's a capital expenditure, up front, at a 3-year cycle or something like that. It's, we buy more capacity than we need, and if you've got stupid bloated code out there, at the end of that 3-year cycle, well, we've grown some,
right.
Belt's a little tight, let's add some more servers. But that type of muscle, for identifying where are the inefficiencies in our code path, what are we using, things like that. That's not a muscle that as many developers have flexed lately as operations guys have. The operations guys who've been watching what is the CPU usage
right.
of our machines, what's the memory utilization, all these things. And so that's where I feel like, and this was, from my time at the Supreme Court, we really started moving toward, there was, we were breaking down the silo from the sense of, we didn't have as much dependency across groups. So, our operations guys, our networking guys, there wasn't a hard dependency to get something out the door to have them. But boy, did you find that you would respect their expertise, their opinions, their past experiences, when all of a sudden you're realizing, this is a little harder than I thought. And so you're offloading the implementation of some of the hardware stuff that's magically just there
right.
in the cloud, but the same principles are still there. It's just in some cases you don't have the tools that we're used to be able to inspect and know what's going on, and so you need to have somebody with the scar tissue that starts flaring up, like, this sounds like a bad idea, this seems like we're going down a bad path, this is something we should inspect and look at.
You could get to the point where, say a Scrum team or a product team, if they started getting their own budget, saying, hey, your app better run good, because here's the money to run it, versus, like you said, it's like, hey, I don't have to have, it doesn't be that performant because somebody else is paying the bill for memory and CPU utilization.
Yeah, that's when you set some metrics on that team to abide by response times and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back to the measurement principle, right? If you walk around and say, how much CPU are you using on average? Would they know? Would they know how to find out? Does your app run worse or better, than this guy's app? Or, without that kind of measurement, without those dashboards, they wouldn't know. Man, we got some apps at work, man, there's some memory hogs. Holy moly.
Yeah, I'm not going to say this has ever happened, but sometimes, they're like, wow, garbage collection. It is just killing us. So let's throw more RAM at it.
Right.
So we just never have to garbage collect.
Yeah, I find it humorous. Like, I think when they named it garbage collection, there was like a secret note that they were trying to slip us there.
Yeah. It's garbage, all garbage.
I think a concept that I didn't see on your slides is justifying the cost of taking time to automate versus just do it the manual method, right? Because you can get the product out faster the first time by doing it manually.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're in a hurry, what are you gonna do? And we've been in a hurry for a while.
But isn't that an ROI discussion? If you let me spend this much time on the automation, you could probably calculate the saving of man hours or people hours or additional costs if you automate. It's taking the time out to do that exercise and just a quick, not an in-depth, but a quick rationalization of, look at the example that Garrin gave of something that took 8 hours and got condensed to 3 minutes. Is that right?
Yep.
How many times was that 8 hours, situation needed times that X versus the 3 minutes and all the man time saved to do that?
Well, not only that really helped the dev teams and take focus in the single war per endpoint concept that Joe wanted to push.
That's what I think.
It really helped.
To your point, Russ, there's also there's a little bit of danger of automate to say you've automated. It kind of goes back to that photomation, kind of concept where somebody's doing it manually to make sure that it's a good process. I wouldn't have a problem with that. As long as it was a repeatable manual process that is right to be automated. There may be some value in that to work out the bug. If I write some automation, I do a command line. I didn't work. I do a command line. So I kind of get a collection of commands and a collection of things I need to do first. I know that work, and then I wrap that in some kind of automation, or I cut the fat out of it from that perspective. Because you're right. There's always going to be that dilemma about, can I get it fast or not?
It's hard to estimate how long it's going to take and how many good people you're going to need, and
But an estimate is better than no estimate.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You got to start somewhere, and plus you got to get to a point where somebody's got to make a business decision. Hey, I can do it now, and certainly I can meet that hunger that you have right now, or I can feed you in the long run. Which one do you want? And ultimately comes to the business making a decision on what's the priority.
And technical debt, you use technical debt as I love using that as a credit card. If I hear that a lot, hey, there's times when the business needs to be, you have to deliver stuff to the customer, right? Nobody's going to stand on there, draw a line in the sand and go, well, because I can't automate this, I'm going to miss my deliverables, We're never going to win that battle, right? So like a credit card, technical debt kind of gets you out of a bind sometimes. I got to incur a little bit now to meet the deliverable, but the bill comes due. Right, so if it's hey, I can't automate it first time around because I need to deliver fast. Sure, but the understanding of the bill paying process, right? I've been on projects when I used to work for telecom where I'd find out, oh, by the way, we already shot the commercial. It's going to be airing next week. So can I get an extra week? No, right? It's already going to be on the air with a URL in the bottom of it. Great, some dates you can't move, right? And yeah, you incur a boatload of garbage on day one, but the process to remove it is already defined. Should be. Would like to be.
Should be.
Yeah, it's the hard part, right? It's not a one-time thing.
You mentioned value stream maps, and to do a really good value stream map takes a lot of work. But you can also do a very high-level one. And you can, go just deep enough to find the bottleneck, right? Because one of the things that Lean Principles teaches you is, if you're not addressing the bottleneck, you're wasting your time, right? If you improve things before the bottleneck, well, you're just going to build up queues. If you're improving things after the bottleneck, you're going to starve your work centers. You need to focus on the bottleneck, and so you do just enough to do that, and then you drill into that, and you figure out, okay, well, this is our bottleneck. We know that we can get to this point, and everything stops until things go through this. You start to figure out what are the pieces of that we can automate, and you can take the time in that context, and hopefully that's isolated enough, well defined enough that you can say, yeah, we spend this much time doing this much time doing this much time doing this, and then you can really quickly throw together some math to say, okay, well, yeah, computer can totally do this, 8 hours, 20 hours, whatever of, man hours of work, and take it down to just a couple minutes or whatever.
The nice thing is, like, when you're trying to introduce DevOps to an organization, the value stream discussion, they're only ready for the high level. Right? I mean, those bottlenecks are like, bam, there it is. Was it Sally or Susie has to run down the hall 3 times? Okay, that's an easy one to fix, right? It's a more mature organization, then you get into let's get into these really nitty gritty ones. You're squeezing every dime out of it, but early on, I feel it's a fairly simple. It's like posted notes. Doesn't take a whole lot of just to get through that high level stuff.
Yeah, a really good book that I suggest for people who want to learn more about value stream mapping is Learning to See. Mike Rother. He's
So is that learning what?
Learning to See.
To see.
Yes.
Like with your eyes.
With your eyes.
I mean, programming languages.
Yeah.
and-
No,
or I know you
not
said-
C.
Yeah, right.
Or you said deceit.
Yeah.
And
Was he on a
Learning
boat?
deceit. Learning
Yes.
deceit. I was like, what?
No, Mike Rother, Learning to See.
All right.
He's the same guy who wrote the Toyota Kata.
Oh, okay.
Mm.
Cool.
Check that out.
Garrin, you covered 3 great characters, and that's the benefit of having already engaged them. But at some point, I'd like to hear more about what I consider the I want to believers, right? I want to believe. I want to understand, or they know a little bit. They've heard enough about DevOps, but how do you address that with somebody and say, hey, you think you want DevOps, and do you understand what you're asking for? You know what it is, and it's not a team of people. It's a culture, and looking at all the aspects of Calmer. It'd be fun to explore that a little more. You cover the fact that you've already got people that are engaged.
Right.
I think a bigger challenge is an audience of people who are like, yeah, I want to do that, but I don't know where to start, or I'm not sure, how we get there.
You could call them the wannabe.
The wannabe. Yeah, that's true.
I was hoping to picture David Duchovny. I want to believe.
Yeah. Works.
Yeah, I
He's
mean,
out there.
I know for my team, it's hard. So I kind of talk about like not being a fanboy sometimes, but I think it's hard to not get caught up in being just like, hey, I'm a DevOps practitioner, you suck, I rule kind of stuff, right? You really need to be able to take people through that journey in detail. Whether you be you're a PMI certified, project manager, or program manager with many years of good experience, and now you're bringing concepts like Kanban, and I got index cards taped to my whiteboard. They're like, what the hell are you doing? You need to be able to guide them through those principles.
Yes.
I think that's and not be so pompous that that you don't iterate on your own stuff, right? To go, hey, this is how we do it right now, but tomorrow we'll probably try to do it a little bit better. There's nothing wrong with that, and that's why I think that the place to start, you're not looking to start from greenfield.
No.
It's just start. Just start. Just say you started, and do something a little bit different, a little bit better every single day with a vision of what you want, and hey, you're doing DevOps.
I think a useful concept for, I don't know, a slide deck, or maybe this one, is a toolbox. Like, there's that pattern toolbox, maybe. That pattern of giving a button to somebody, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or, finding the constraint, or come up with something.
Yeah, I hear you.
There are things that are DevOps that help you define DevOps if you can show them these are DevOps.
Yeah, but I'd be careful with maybe going right to the toolbox, right? Mechanic needs to explain what you're trying to fix.
Exactly. You need some metrics to back up.
Yeah, going back to start somewhere, which I agree, but you have to have a baseline that says, hey, here's where we are today. Here's something we can measure. We're going to iterate on it. We're going to make it better, right? And it's not, maybe misunderstood what you're saying, but it's not just jumping in, here's the tool set.
These are the tools to make your organization more efficient.
Yeah.
I mean,
He's not
that's
talking
probably the goal.
software. He's not necessarily
Not at all.
software
Oh,
I
okay,
mean,
okay, that's-
I mean, like building Dave Knight a button or RJE a button, or identifying the constraint.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Those are DevOps concepts, right?
What's your opinion of organizations that can do it with their team and say, hey, we want to start doing DevOps, as opposed to we need to bring someone from the outside, different perspective, and then do that? What is your opinion? Is it more successful one way or the other?
Well, I mean, probably for me, it would probably depend on how well an organization is good at vision, right? Do they know it's possible, right? So I'm a big fan of objectives. Talk about, again, the state of DevOps. If you were to say, listen, to be an elite, software performer, you need to do 4 deployments to production every day, right? Now, if an organization can go, I've been asking for this. This is my goal, is I want to get to 4 software deployments to prod every single day, and their teams can guide them down that road, right? It's the DevOps journey. They're going to wind down it for a while. But if they don't have a means of establishing that vision, they don't know what's possible, if they don't know what they should or should not be doing, then I think kind of that an outside perspective becomes far more helpful, because you get people I've been coding on this for 20 years and we didn't do 4 times a day,
I think part of that formula is an organization that's good at transformation, right? If you got an organization that can shift gears, and not run up against some of the characters he's talking about. They've got a team of people who are open-minded to that vision. Yeah, we'll shift gears. We'll do it a different way. I think that's all relative on the team that you're talking about. Yeah.
It's important that the organization be willing to change process too, to adhere to some of these things at the same time. Because if you get wound up in paperwork, like on the recovery side, you're talking about let's get the customer back going versus, worrying about the paperwork. You need to be able to make processes in place that allow things to flow quicker too.
I mean, I can also give you an example of where some outside perspective really helped was, with the Supreme Court, we had people who their adolescence, their maturity, their, most of their adult life was COBOL, which, first off, I want to say anybody who wants to try to downplay the effectiveness of COBOL, shame on you, because there's, you need to respect what it can do, and you better make sure whatever you do can do better than that, and that is no easy task. But there were these people who were, phenomenal COBOL programmers who were told, okay, we're going to go through this change. We're going to start doing .NET. We're going to start doing microservices. We're going to deploy to Azure. And, these people who could have very well been like, okay, that's great. I'm going to go, hide in a corner and, just, slowly wait out my retirement. Instead, they jumped in. They're like, all right, let's do this. Let's take this adventure and see what we can do. But they didn't necessarily have all the expertise to know, and I say this not as something to try to put down these people, but it was just the reality was, there were several people that I was working with who did not understand what DNS was. Now, for me, just my experience, my background, like how can you do any sort of web apps without understanding what DNS is? And then you realize, well, what they were doing were not fundamentally web apps. They were not web apps as a first-class citizen. And so there was nothing wrong with the fact that they didn't have the need to learn this thing, and so they never learned this thing that they never needed to know. But when we brought in new people who had more of a full-stack perspective, when we started to expose them to different parts of the value stream, to start doing that actual shift left of, okay, no, we need to start thinking about these things, while we're developing, rather than waiting for somebody else to figure out, what CNAMEs we need and what routing rules we need, and where do we need security to, physical security versus, application level security. Just introducing them to that over time, there are organizations who can do that totally from the inside, but pretty much anybody would benefit, at least short term, from having that outside expertise, that kind of outside change agent. Sometimes it's easier to let go, you know, if it's not, man, you're telling me Jimmy's going to teach me how to be better at what I do? Because I've seen some of the stupid stuff he's done. You know, sometimes when you bring in that outside expert, whether they're actually better or not, sometimes it's just you're more willing to give in to that and let them kind of take on some of the blame if you do it wrong sometimes.
But,
you know?
but I like that question because it gives me an opportunity to tell you that there's some danger in bringing someone out from the outside, right? You'll get believers, obviously, and they come with their baggage. They like their specific tools. They're arrogant. They want to do it their way. Okay, and if they don't get to do it their way, they might be bound, on to the next thing quickly. So yeah, there's risk, I guess.
There is risk, and I think software in general is so amazing because of everything that the industry as a whole can do, right? So I'm such a fan of asking why I can't have something. Kind of mentioned this, right? It's like, well, you can't have that tested that fast. It takes too long. I got cars driving themselves, and you're telling me that I can't have this? Bull, right? There's a reason I can't. Now, if it's a valid reason, great. But that's kind of that outside influence to help walk down that discussion path to say, figure out why you can't have it. It could be knowledge. It could be money. It could be a variety of things. And if you establish why you can't and you're okay with that, good for you. But to say you can't have it because you've never done it before, well, that's not going to fly.
I say don't become another buzzword on any of this either. Like with DevOps, it's like we're DevOps, just
Right.
like how we're agile, right? The same things happen. And I look at it as like, what are the things you want to accomplish? And I say, like, for my organizations and some of what we're doing, let's see if we can get deployments to happen during business hours. And what a huge goal that was in itself. Just deploying not off hours on the weekends. And if you get to that, then you can say, okay, now let's deploy multiple times. Or even from a dev team, you say, let's start writing unit tests all the time. So we can actually have things like automated in our test process, but like getting to being where you're actually being really good at unit testing as a group. And then maybe it's things like, let's make it so that when we hire a new developer, they can actually get up and running within an hour on their box, and not 3 days a week. There's so many. There's so many things that we can do that are compasses of this DevOps thing, but they're like little smaller goals that I think are so much easier for an organization to bite off, and they can just make us so much better groups and so much better teams, with kind of things like that. So
I think going in with clear goals will also help to a certain degree, avoiding I just want to put in my opinions and implement what I've been able to get paid a lot of money to do in the past, or even better yet, the resume-driven development where it's, I'm going to come in, I'm going to learn some new thing, but you're going to pay me to learn the new thing so that I can sell myself to the next company.
Sure.
I went to a conference last year. It was a really good conference, the DevOps Enterprise Summit, right? And I went to a presentation where a guy from the U.S. Patent Office did a presentation about how they adopted DevOps, and it was hilarious and also so hopeful because he basically said, like, if we can do it, anybody can do it. He's like, we're in the Constitution, for crying out loud. He kind of laid out. He's like, if the U.S. Patent Office can bring DevOps into their software development, because you want to talk about bureaucracy, you want to talk about auditability. These concepts, he's like, I got you beat every single time, But it was really encouraging to listen to them talk about it because they went through how they started with, I think it was, they could roll out bug fixes only, right? So like the big old behemoth of a release process, unless it was just a bug fix, and those could go out quickly. And then eventually, I think their leadership goes, can I have more of that? Yes, you could. Or they kind of roll it that way, but I think those kind of discussions with companies a little bit to go, you're not immune, you have to have the goals. There's somewhere somebody has had success doing this. I have to believe that anyways.
I remember the same thing with an organization. It was like, it'll take us 6 months to go through validation of a release. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how are you going to know that we have this right? And they goes, oh, don't worry about it. All we have to do is get it released. Then we can do iterative releases on it every time. So it's like, you'd be told crap as long as it passed whatever metrics they had. Yeah. So you just gotta know how to work within these.
I talked to one guy. He was so hilarious. I was like, hey, how often do you guys do releases? He's like, it's about every 8 weeks. It's like, oh, 8 weeks. I was like, what kind of work do you? He's like, well, I do navigation software for satellites. I was like, oh, 8 weeks, huh? And he's like, yeah, that's only because it orbits Jupiter. It takes it a while. I think to myself like, oh, dude, you're pushing out orbital navigation software to Jupiter in 8 weeks.
Basically, daily releases.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, yeah, there's a website over here every 6 or so. It's fine for that website. You feel so small when you're realizing, I was like, how do you test? He's like, well, there's a satellite in the clean room. That's the text box, the test machine. They can literally see it through a little porthole. I'm like, holy crap. DevOps and satellite navigation is pretty impressive.
I appreciate your insights. That is helpful.
I think it's fun to talk about. I think because on one hand, I feel like it's an easy sell because if you look at the numbers, like you go to say a dev report, you download, you look at the numbers, it's like, who's going to argue with you? You basically rein in money, at the end of the day when you implement some of this kind of stuff. So it's not that people just flat out think it's a fad or think it's not for them, right? It's in these details of how you roll it out and what are their problems and what are they trying to address. Because the concept's hard to argue with.
I think it's always just resistance to change. In any organization, anything you're putting out there, you're going to have people afraid of resistance or change.
Right. And I think as DevOps practitioners, that's where the walk the walk kind of stuff that we have to be very conscious of, leading people through these conversations and through these talks without going, hey, just do Agile, be better. Not that easy.
Thank you, Garrin.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I appreciate you showing up. It's probably for the pizza more than it was for me, but that was so cool.
Beaver too.
Yeah. And if you know clients who need DevOps help, clients who need clients that need
Before
DevOps
everybody
help.
goes, we actually have some giveaways back.
Bring it up to me on a daily basis. Hey, what are you doing?
I'm gonna very scientifically number us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay.
You're
So
I think I'm one.
the
First
first
last.
winner of a skinny dip thing,
What?
number 3. So Jamie.
Jamie, send your away, man.
Yeah.
Send your away.
My wife would be so excited.
Yeah. No pictures, please.
Chris gets whatever is in the Coleman bag.
That's scary.
Ooh.
It's like a chair.
Chair.
Assume a chair.
Portable cooler.
It's a trebuchet.
The chair. Sit in my backyard and watch the deer.
Nice.
All right, and Russ gets whatever is in here. Looks like a towel. I think
Wow,
it's
awesome.
to bathe.
Some dew point swag.
Any other chair, no towel?